It was the kind of morning Ethan Morales had been dreaming about for weeks. The plane touched down in Denver just after 8 a.m., and a crisp spring breeze greeted him as he stepped out of the terminal. For most people, Easter weekend meant chocolate bunnies and family brunch. For Ethan, it meant finally reuniting with his mom. He adjusted the strap on his backpack and climbed into the cab that would take him to Pineview, a small mountain town nestled along the edge of the Rockies in Colorado. The 2-hour drive wound through pine-covered hills and sleepy ski villages, the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and knew each other's dogs by name. For the 14-year-old, this wasn't just another holiday visit. It was home, or at least it used to be before the divorce. His mom, Lillian Torres, had remarried 2 years ago to Jerome Ellis, a wealthy real estate developer who owned a handful of mountain properties. Together, they had 3 young children. Even though Ethan was technically the half-brother, no one ever made him feel like anything less than the eldest son. He loved the chaos, the noise, the smell of fresh waffles on Saturday mornings. And he especially liked Jerome, who treated him more like a buddy than a stepdad. The Ellis family lived in a stunning 3-story lodge-style home called Pineview Lodge, perched on a slope overlooking the valley. Every time Ethan visited, it felt like stepping into a postcard. Wood-paneled walls, giant windows, the scent of burning firewood and pine. It was comfort. It was safety. But on April 10, 2003, when Ethan stepped out of the taxi at the edge of their snow-lined driveway, something felt wrong. No one was outside. The family's SUV, a silver Chevy Suburban, was gone. Odd, considering they'd arranged everything: his flight, his ride. They knew exactly what time he'd arrive. He pulled his suitcase up the stone path and rang the doorbell. Nothing. He rang it again, this time holding it longer. No footsteps, no voices, not even the bark of Sophie, the family's aging golden retriever. He knocked. Then again harder. Still nothing. He tried the front door, but it was locked. So he circled the house, checking each window. They were all shut tight, the curtains drawn. The house, once so full of life, now stood eerily silent. Maybe they'd gone out for groceries, he thought. Maybe they got the timing wrong. He tried calling the landline, no answer. Then his mom's cell. Then Jerome's. No answer. By noon, Ethan had been standing outside for nearly 3 hours. The wind had picked up, and with it, the early signs of a spring snow. He sat on his suitcase, staring at the house. There was a sticky note in his bag, so he scribbled a quick message. "Hey Mom, it's me. I'm here. Where are you?" He stuck it to the door with chewing gum. By 1:30 p.m., his stomach began to protest. He dragged his suitcase down the road to Maple Ridge Grill, a cozy little diner the family used to frequent. The owner, Clyde Watterson, a stocky man in his 60s with a permanent sunburn and a voice like gravel, instantly recognized Ethan. "Where's your mom?" Clyde asked, wiping his hands on his apron. "That's what I was hoping you'd tell me." Ethan explained everything. The taxi, the empty house, the unanswered calls. Clyde frowned, told him to eat something and wait. "They'll be back soon," he said. "You'll see." By nightfall, the air had turned icy. Snow dusted the street like powdered sugar. The lodge windows stayed dark. Ethan's eyes never left the hill. Seeing the boys' growing anxiety, Clyde finally said, "Let's go check it out. Just to be sure." They drove up in Clyde's pickup and parked under the tall pine trees. Clyde knocked on the front door, then the side door. Then he walked around back. That's when he found it. A small maintenance door, locked. He hesitated for a moment, then pushed it open. Inside, everything was pristine. Too pristine. No coats on the rack. No shoes by the door. The dining table was wiped clean, not a single plate or toy in sight. But it wasn't just clean, it was sterile. As if someone had tried to erase the very presence of a family. Clyde's brows furrowed. "This isn't right." He didn't say more. He locked up and took Ethan home with him for the night. The next morning, Ethan tried again. Calls, messages, walking up to the house. Nothing. That's when they called the police. At first, officers from the Pineview Police Department approached it like any other welfare check. Missing persons? It was Easter weekend. Families traveled. Maybe the Elises forgot the dates. Maybe something came up. But then they stepped inside the lodge and found everything exactly as Clyde described. Everything except the people. When Officer Denise Harper pulled her cruiser up the icy slope toward Pineview Lodge, she didn't expect much. She'd done her fair share of wellness checks, elderly folks who'd forgotten to charge their phones, teenagers who skipped school and didn't call home. Most of the time, it ended with a laugh and a warning. But this one felt different. She parked behind a rusty pickup truck, the one belonging to Clyde Watterson, the diner owner, and spotted the man standing next to a teenage boy with a navy backpack. Clyde waved her over. "This is the kid," he said. "Ethan Morales. Says he flew in from California to spend Easter with his mom." Ethan gave a nervous nod, his voice barely a whisper. "They knew I was coming. No one's home. No one's answering." Harper looked up at the lodge. Tall, symmetrical, and almost too perfect. Everything about it felt staged, like a cabin from a luxury travel brochure. But in the thin mountain air, with no footprints in the snow and no vehicle in the driveway, it somehow looked vacant. Empty in a way that didn't make sense. She walked the perimeter. No signs of forced entry. The windows were closed and locked. The glass was clear and clean, curtains drawn neatly behind each pane. She pressed the doorbell. Nothing. Knocked twice. Still nothing. "Clyde says there's a maintenance door in the back," Ethan added. It was unlocked, just like the diner owner had said the night before. Harper called it in. Entering residence at 1147 Ridgeview Lane. No response at the door. Secondary access unsecured. Possible welfare situation. Proceeding with caution. She drew her flashlight, not because it was dark, but because the lodge's interior gave her a strange chill. Like stepping into a room where someone had just been and left in a hurry. The kitchen was spotless. Countertops wiped down. Sink empty. But on the stove, still sitting cold, was a pot, crusted with what looked like reheated stew. A spoon lay across the top. Next to it, a cereal bowl with a single spoon inside. In the dining area, chairs were tucked in, placemats neatly arranged. Nothing broken. No signs of struggle. Then she noticed the laptop on the side table in the living room, still blinking in sleep mode. She walked up the stairs slowly. On the second floor, everything looked pristine again, except the bedrooms. In the girls' room, the beds were stripped. No sheets, no blankets. Just bare mattresses with stuffed animals lined up perfectly against the wall. That's when Harper's instincts kicked in. Families didn't leave their kids' beds stripped unless they were doing laundry. But there were no laundry baskets anywhere. No hampers. And nothing in the washing machine downstairs. She checked the master bedroom. Lillian and Jerome's bed was still made. On the nightstand sat a pair of reading glasses and a romance novel with a dog-eared page. A phone charger, unplugged, still curled neatly in place. The walk-in closet had a dozen coats and sweaters, expensive stuff. Fur-lined parkas, hiking boots, ski goggles. Nothing seemed to be packed. If they had left town, they hadn't taken their clothes. Back downstairs, she opened the fridge. Fully stocked. Fresh milk, eggs, chopped fruit in containers. On the top shelf was a small birthday cake with Grace, 6 written in frosting. The candles were still in the box beside it. Harper stepped outside, walked back to the cruiser, and leaned against the hood. Her gut twisted. Something was wrong. She turned to Ethan. "Do you remember if your mom said anything strange? Was she upset last time you spoke?" Ethan shook his head. "No. Everything was normal. She texted me to say she was excited. Said the kids had made a banner for me." Clyde frowned. That woman loved her boy. She wouldn't just forget he was coming. Harper nodded. "I believe you." She radioed it in again, this time more firmly. "Dispatch, this is Officer Harper. I'm requesting immediate follow-up at 1147 Ridgeview. Suspicious absence. Unsecured entry point. No visible family members. Scene needs secondary inspection and photographic documentation. Over." By sunset, yellow tape had gone up around the perimeter of Pineview Lodge. Detective Mark Dorsey from the county sheriff's office arrived an hour later. He was an old-school investigator, gray-streaked beard, battered notepad, and a memory that missed nothing. He walked through the house slowly. No small talk. No comments. Just long pauses and scribbles. After a while, he looked at Harper and said, "Where's the dog?" The boy said they had one. No dog bowls. No leash. No fur. No smell. He wasn't wrong. Sophie, the golden retriever, was gone too. No trace of her in the house. Dorsey crouched down by the living room window. He pointed at something tiny, a scratch on the sill, half covered by the curtain. Just beneath it, a faint reddish stain. Blood. Tiny. But real. He turned back to Harper. "We're not looking at a vacation trip gone wrong. We're looking at a scene that's been cleaned." The forensic team arrived the next morning. They began dusting the rooms, running UV lights across walls and floors. And what they found only confirmed what Dorsey feared. In the hallway leading from the staircase to the second floor, faint smears lit up like neon under luminol spray. In Grace's room, a small molar was found under the bed frame. In the downstairs bathroom, fragments of a plastic glove were discovered inside the trash can, along with an empty bottle of bleach. Still no sign of Jerome, Lillian, or the kids. But Pineview Lodge was no longer silent. It had started whispering its secrets. In the early morning chill of April 13th, the forensic team returned to Pineview Lodge. The tape was already up. Curious neighbors had started to gather at a respectful distance, some with coffee cups in hand, others whispering through cracked windows. Detective Mark Dorsey didn't like attention. And he especially didn't like people walking past an unsecured crime scene. "Let's seal it down properly this time," he said to Officer Harper. "Full perimeter. No foot traffic." The previous day's preliminary findings had made one thing clear. This wasn't a family trip gone wrong. This was something else. Something darker. The kind of case that didn't whisper, it loomed. Like a storm waiting just beyond the ridge. By 9:15 a.m., the technicians had set up mobile lighting units throughout the lodge. Dusting powder coated the edges of doorknobs. Cameras clicked rhythmically as every room, every drawer, every shadow was catalogued. And soon the signs began to speak. In the girl's bedroom, the absence of sheets and blankets wasn't just strange anymore. It was suspicious. No laundry. No signs of spring cleaning. Just bare mattresses and open drawers. But on the closet door, a smudge, high up. It looked like a handprint, though barely visible to the naked eye. Under blue light, it glowed faintly. It had been wiped, but not completely. Whoever tried to clean it had missed a trace. On the desk underneath the window, a small notebook lay half-tucked beneath a colored pencil case. A doodle of a bunny and 3 stick figures holding hands took up one corner of the page. Above it, scrawled in childish handwriting, "Can't wait for Ethan to come. I saved him the green egg." Signed, Sophia. Harper paused as she read it. "They were expecting him," she said quietly. Dorsey nodded. This wasn't an unplanned departure. In the living room, the focus shifted to the windowsill. That faint stain Dorsey had spotted? Confirmed, blood, later matched to Jerome Ellis. And beside the window, a deep scratch in the hardwood floor, running almost in a straight line toward the hallway. Parallel to it, another. Like furniture had been dragged. Or something heavier. In the cracks between the floorboards, they found a few fine strands of hair. Dark, long, and likely female. The forensic team collected them carefully, bagging them with gloved precision. Nearby, wedged beneath the side of the couch, was a single pink plastic hair clip. The kind a child might wear to a birthday party. The kitchen was the next stop. And there, the illusion of normalcy started to fracture. A pot on the stove still had hardened stew inside, now starting to sour. In the sink, not a single dirty dish. The trash bin, however, told a different story. Inside, 2 used plastic gloves. A nearly empty bottle of all-purpose cleaner. Paper towels faintly stained pink. And a receipt from a local hardware store, dated April 9th, 2 days before Ethan arrived. Itemized purchases included bleach, heavy-duty garbage bags, a multi-pack of gloves, zip ties, and 1 6x8 tarp. Harper stared at the list. "Not exactly Easter dinner supplies," she muttered. Then came the basement. The lodge's lower level was typically a game and storage area, mostly unused except during large gatherings. But when Dorsey stepped inside, he noticed something odd. The air was fresher than the rest of the house. The floor, recently mopped. The windows? Slightly ajar. Someone had cleaned down here and aired it out. Along one wall sat an empty shelving unit. Dust patterns suggested something had recently been removed, something box-shaped, heavy, and long enough to cover a small mattress. They found a child's sock wedged behind the shelf. Purple with little white hearts. Later testing would show traces of Grace Ellis's DNA. Then came the turning point. Around noon, one of the techs called out from the master bathroom. "There's something in the drain." A plumber's scope was threaded down the bathtub pipe. Within minutes, they retrieved a small clump of tissue and hair, too degraded to immediately identify, but later confirmed to match Lillian Torres's profile. Dorsey exhaled slowly. "We're not dealing with a disappearance," he said at last. "We're dealing with a contained crime scene. Someone tried to erase it, but didn't know how thorough we could be." By late afternoon, the lodge was no longer a mystery. It was a map, a record of moments gone terribly wrong. In the foyer, near the coat rack, they found 3 shoe prints. One adult male, size 11. One child, size 3. One adult female, size 8. All going toward the front door. None coming back. There were no signs of forced entry anywhere in the house. No shattered windows. No broken locks. The front door had been locked from the inside. The only door left ajar had been the maintenance entrance, the one Clyde had found. That suggested the killer had access. Or worse, was invited in. At 5:17 p.m., as shadows stretched across the ridge outside, Dorsey stood on the front porch, arms crossed, watching Ethan play idly with a twig near the cruiser. The boy had said something the day before. Something simple. Easy to miss. "They texted me. Said they were excited." That meant they were alive and well, the day before Ethan arrived. Which meant whoever had done this had worked fast, cleaned faster, and wanted the lodge to look untouched. Dorsey pulled out his notebook and underlined 3 words. Familiarity. Whoever had been here knew the house. They weren't just a stranger. They had history with the family. It was the 4th day since the Morales-Ellis family had been reported missing. By now, the small town of Pineview was no longer calm. News vans had arrived. The quiet hum of morning joggers and clinking coffee cups at local diners had been replaced with speculation. Murmurs. People stopped locking eyes. They locked their doors instead. Detective Mark Dorsey had seen this before, small-town paranoia. But this time, it wasn't unwarranted. This time, there was no denying something terrible had happened inside that pristine wooden house on the hill. The signs weren't just subtle anymore. They were loud, persistent, and getting harder to ignore. And just when the team thought the lodge had offered up all it could, someone showed up to look back in. It was Harper who spotted him. She'd been organizing photos and bagged evidence into labeled boxes at the command tent just outside the scene when she caught a strange glint in the distance. A man stood across the street, partially concealed by a grove of pine trees. He was holding binoculars. Not casually, not playfully, but locked in, his attention fixed squarely on Pineview Lodge. He didn't seem surprised by the patrol cars. Or the yellow tape. He wasn't trying to sneak in. He was observing, like someone watching a movie they'd already seen, trying to predict when the next scene would begin. "Hey," Harper whispered into her radio. "We've got a watcher, East Perimeter, Ridge Tree Line. Caucasian male, mid-30s, blue jacket. Binoculars." By the time Dorsey circled around the block, the man had put the binoculars away and started walking down the slope toward the back of a rundown cabin. Dorsey approached calmly. "Nice view up there?" The man turned, startled, but not running. He was average height, athletic build, with thick eyebrows and a stubble-covered jaw. A slight hitch in his speech betrayed nervousness when he responded. "Just curious. I live around here. Been seeing news trucks. Thought I'd check it out." Dorsey nodded, subtle. "Your name?" "Darren. Darren Holt." "And what do you do, Darren?" "Welder. I work over in Silver Creek. Been here about 2 years. Came out with my girlfriend when she got a job." Dorsey narrowed his eyes. You know the Ellis family? Darren hesitated. Just long enough. We met. Jerome came by the place once. Needed help with a pipe-fitting job at one of his chalets. I gave him a hand. That was about it. But that wasn't it. Because 5 minutes later, while cross-checking Darren's name with previous police notes, Harper found something odd. Ethan Morales had mentioned it during his initial interview. I think I remember a guy named Darren. Mom said he once helped fix the garage heater. But Jerome said he was a little off. Not to invite him over again. Interesting. Back at the station, Dorsey asked Darren to come in for a formal statement. He didn't resist. In fact, he seemed eager. Inside the interview room, Holt sat upright, overly cooperative. Like someone auditioning for the role of the concerned neighbor. He asked about the family. Speculated freely. Gave unsolicited theories about possible suspects. Then, casually, he said something that changed everything. You know, Jerome was always flashy. Cars, that big flat screen, the long table, the custom gas range in the kitchen, Italian, I think. Dorsey's pen stopped mid-sentence. Because none of those details had been released to the public. How do you know about the kitchen? He asked, voice flat. Darren blinked. What? You said custom gas range. Flat screen. Long table. That sounds like a guy who's been inside the house. Like I said, I helped with the garage once. In the kitchen? No. But Jerome mentioned it. He liked to show off, you know? Harper was already checking the official contractor records. There was no Darren Holt listed in any of Jerome's registered properties. And that wasn't all. 2 days earlier, when the tourists who'd rented another one of Jerome's chalets had come in for questioning, they gave a statement that now lit up like a warning flare. They said a man named Darren had met them at the door instead of Jerome. They had expected Jerome. He had promised to greet them himself. But instead, a man, polite, casual, unknown, told them Jerome had been called out of town and that he would be managing the handoff. That man was Darren Holt. And no one ever told Darren where the guests were staying. That night, the team returned to Pineview Lodge to check for signs of forced entry. But there weren't any. Instead, they found something chilling. The back door, the same one Clyde had discovered unlocked, had Darren Holt's fingerprints on the handle. Matched via the voluntary fingerprint card he'd given earlier that day, smugly believing he was helping rule himself out. It didn't. It did the opposite. Now, Dorsey had a man with knowledge of the house layout, access to the property, a documented history of contact with the family, and behavior that, while not outright illegal, was clearly curated. Performed. Harper leaned in over the evidence table back at the station. He wanted the house. What? This isn't just curiosity, she said. He's not looking for justice. He's studying what it would take to erase someone. Outside the interrogation room, the feed from the camera played silently. Darren sat there. But every now and then, he'd glance around. His fingers would tap the edge of the table. His knee would twitch under the chair. Like he was waiting. Not to be questioned, but to see if they had found it yet. Inside interview room 2 at the Pine County Sheriff's Office, the air wasn't tense. Not at first. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. The camera in the corner blinked red, recording. And Darren Holt sat comfortably, legs crossed, back upright, hands folded neatly on the table. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't ask to leave. He asked if he could have coffee. Detective Mark Dorsey obliged. Not because he was being polite, but because people like Darren always talked more with a warm drink in hand. And the more they talked, the more they twisted themselves in knots. Let's just start from the beginning, Dorsey said, sliding into the chair across from him. Tell me again how you know the Ellis family. Darren smiled. Too easily. Like I said before. Jerome needed some welding work done in one of his rental units. I just moved here. We talked a few times, not much. He promised me a longer job, but nothing ever came of it. That's it. Dorsey nodded. And yet, you knew about the Italian gas range, the big screen, the 20-seat table in the dining room? Darren chuckled, almost defensively. Look, the guy bragged a lot. He showed off. Talked about his house, his kids, all the stuff he had. Maybe I remembered more than I thought. Dorsey stared at him. Silent. 5 seconds. Then he opened a file and laid out a printed image on the table, a still from the lodge's smart home system, retrieved earlier that morning. It showed a screen capture from a guest profile, the rental agreement signed under Jerome Ellis's account, with the contact handoff confirming Darren Holt as the in-person host. "Explain this," Dorsey said calmly. Darren blinked. His posture stiffened. "That must have been a mistake. I was just covering while Jerome. You said Jerome never trusted you. That he stopped calling. Why would he let you run point on his guests?" Darren's lips parted, but nothing came out. Across the table, Dorsey didn't flinch. "You lied, Darren." He let the words hang in the air. The next morning, the forensic team confirmed a crucial discovery. Fingerprints belonging to Darren Holt had been recovered from inside Pineview Lodge, not just on the back door, but on the refrigerator handle, one of the dining chairs, and most damning of all, the underside of the living room window ledge. The same spot where a smear of Jerome Ellis's blood had been found. That wasn't an accident. It meant Darren had been inside the home after the crime. But that wasn't the only inconsistency. Investigators checked Holt's work records at the Silver Creek plant where he claimed to be on shift the day the family went missing. His manager confirmed Darren had left work early on April 10th, told them he had a family emergency. No details, no follow-up. Harper pulled up his cell phone logs. Between 6 p.m. and midnight that night, there were no outgoing calls. But the GPS pinged twice, once near Pineview Ridge and once near Wolf Peak, a wooded area known for hiking trails, campgrounds, and, on occasion, unauthorized burn pits. It wasn't proof, but it wasn't nothing. Back in the interrogation room, Darren had stopped being helpful. His arms were crossed now. His answers were shorter. His eyes wandered. So they brought in Alexa Vaughn, Darren's girlfriend. She wasn't under arrest. Not yet. But when she sat across from Harper in the observation suite, her voice trembled from the start. "He just got quiet after we moved here. Said Jerome promised him things and kept backing out. Said people like Jerome get to have everything, and guys like him always get left behind." She paused, then whispered, "He used to stand by the window and just stare at the lodge at night." "Did he talk about hurting them?" "No, not exactly. He talked about replacing them." Harper leaned forward. "Replacing them?" Alexa nodded slowly. "He said if the house was empty, he could live there. He said it would be like a fresh start." That phrase struck a chord. Because 4 days after the Morales-Ellis family went missing, Darren had quietly moved into one of Jerome's vacant chalets, claimed it was offered to him in exchange for old debts. He even changed the mailbox name to Holt. No lease. No purchase. Just moved in. As if he'd been waiting. The next piece of the puzzle arrived via mail. Literally. A small package addressed to Jerome Ellis was returned undelivered and forwarded to police as part of the investigation. Inside was a USB flash drive with encrypted documents, backup files from Jerome's business records. Among the folders was one labeled dispute__. It contained emails between Jerome and a legal advisor detailing a complaint filed against Holt several months earlier for squatting, failure to pay rent, and minor theft of tools from a storage unit. Jerome had written, "This guy's becoming a problem. Keeps showing up uninvited. Tried to help him, but he's starting to make Grace uncomfortable. I'm cutting him off." The date? March 8th, 1 month before the family disappeared. By the end of that week, a search warrant was approved for Darren Holt's residence. What they found changed the case entirely. In a locked toolbox in the garage, 2 cell phones belonging to Lillian Torres and Sophia Ellis. A pair of children's snow gloves. A handwritten to-do list titled, "Clean Lodge/dispose of burner/move-in before press arrives." Inside a storage closet. A broken key fob registered to Jerome's SUV. A metal fire pit, recently scrubbed with steel wool. And a single USB drive labeled Ellis Backups, the same naming convention as the business flash drive. No bodies, but enough to draw a map. Dorsey stared at the evidence table that night. "He planned this," he said quietly. Harper nodded, and thought he was smart enough to get away with it. "No," Dorsey whispered. He thought no one would miss them fast enough. By the time news of the search warrant hit local headlines, the town of Pineview had turned. What was once quiet curiosity had become something darker. Whispers in the grocery store, wide eyes in the parking lot, people pointing just slightly too long before looking away. Did you hear? They found the little girl's gloves in his garage. He was living in their house. Like it was his. The Holt residence, barely a 10-minute drive from Pineview Lodge, was now under full surveillance. The front yard, once unremarkable, had become a landmark of dread. And Darren? He didn't ask for a lawyer. But he stopped talking. Inside the interrogation room, silence had replaced smugness. For 36 hours, Darren Holt sat through a cycle of interviews, each more damning than the last. Every question came with a receipt. A photo. A timestamp. A contradiction. You said Jerome let you manage the guests? Here's an email chain showing he filed a formal complaint about you. You said you hadn't been inside the house since December? Your fingerprints are on the fridge handle from 3 weeks ago. You said you didn't know the kids? Their missing belongings are in your closet. Each denial collapsed on contact. Like cardboard underwater. But Darren still wouldn't confess. Instead, he shifted. Blamed others. Suggested the family was mixed up in something. Hinted maybe someone else had done it. Someone like Alexa. That tactic didn't last long. Because Alexa Vaughn, his longtime girlfriend, had already begun talking. On the third night, during a quiet one-on-one with Detective Harper, Alexa broke. Her voice cracked as she described Darren's obsession. He hated Jerome. Said he had everything handed to him, the house, the money, a beautiful family. Said that Jerome looked down on people like him. Like he was disposable. She recalled one night, a month before the family vanished. Darren had been watching an old true crime documentary. A case where a restaurant worker killed his boss and took over the business. Darren had turned to her and said, "You know, if you're smart, you can just step in. People forget faster than you think." At the time, she thought he was joking. Now she wasn't sure he ever was. Then she told them about the fire. On April 10th, around 8:30 p.m., Darren had returned home. He smelled like gasoline. His jacket was scorched. He said nothing, just took a shower and threw his boots in the trash. Alexa, shaking, remembered asking what had happened. He looked her dead in the eye and said, "We're starting over." Detective Dorsey ordered a sweep of the Wolf Peak area. It took a full day and a helicopter search to find the site, deep in a clearing, surrounded by blackened wood and melted plastic. Charred remains of what looked like children's clothing. A scorched photo frame, warped from heat. Fragments of what had once been a wooden bunk bed slat. But most haunting of all, a silver locket, blackened but intact, with the engraved initials G. Grace Ellis. Forensic teams worked overnight. Dental fragments confirmed what they feared. 5 individuals. 2 adult. 3 children. And a 6th DNA profile mixed in the scene, belonging to Darren Holt. At this point, the evidence wasn't circumstantial. It was overwhelming, crushing, undeniable. Back in the station, under the weight of it all, Darren sat in silence. He asked for a cup of water, then stared into the mirror across from him for 10 long minutes. Finally, his voice broke the stillness. "I didn't plan to kill them. It just happened." That was the beginning of the unraveling. He said Jerome had invited him over to discuss an old debt, something about helping with house maintenance again. He brought a gun, just in case. They argued. It got loud. The children came downstairs. One of them, Letitia, tripped during the shouting match and hit her head. Jerome lunged. Darren panicked. 1 shot. Then 2. Then 5. He said it blurred. He said he couldn't stop. It was quiet after that. I just looked around. And I thought, it's done. I've gone too far. So he wrapped the bodies. Used the missing blankets. Loaded them into Jerome's SUV. Drove them to Wolf Peak. He said he watched the fire burn for hours. And when it was done, he drove the SUV to a parking lot near Eagle Pass Airport, cleaned it, left it there to look like they'd gone on a trip. Then he walked back into Pineview like nothing had happened. He cleaned the house the next night. He returned for the laptops. He deleted the cameras, wiped the devices, and prepared to move into one of Jerome's chalets, his new start. I was going to paint the walls, fix the porch, maybe even keep the dog. He said it like he believed it, like the nightmare could be rebranded into a quiet life in a mountain town. But the truth had teeth, and it had bitten down. Harper stared at him across the table. You didn't just kill them, Darren. You erased them. He said nothing. The mask was off, and the man beneath was finally visible. October 14, 2004. Nearly 18 months after Ethan Morales stood on the doorstep of Pineview Lodge, alone and confused, the trial of Darren Holt began. By now, the details of the case were national news. Newspapers labeled him the man who took a family to steal a house. Cable shows dissected his cold expressions in court. Locals whispered about how someone so ordinary could live among them, hiding something so monstrous. But the courtroom itself was quiet. Not sensational. Not dramatic. Just quiet. As if no amount of testimony or sentencing could ever truly restore what had been lost. The prosecution's case was airtight. They presented forensic matches from Pineview Lodge and the Wolf Peak burn site. Digital records of Darren posing as a property manager. Recovered belongings of the Morales-Ellis family from Darren's home. GPS logs from his phone placing him at every key location. And most damning of all, his own recorded confession. Alexa Vaughn took the stand. So did Clyde Watterson. So did Ethan. When the boy entered the courtroom, now a year older, taller, a little more withdrawn, the room shifted. He didn't cry. He didn't look at Darren. He simply told the court how he rang the doorbell. How no one answered. How the banner that said, "Welcome home, Ethan," was never hung. And how, even now, he sometimes dreams that the house would open and everyone would be standing inside. Alive. The defense attempted to soften Darren's image. They described a man riddled with insecurity, failed promises, economic struggle. They argued he hadn't planned to kill anyone. That he snapped. That he was ashamed. But the jury didn't flinch. After only 7 hours of deliberation, they returned with their verdict. Guilty. On all counts. Premeditated murder of 5 individuals. Tampering with evidence. Obstruction. Identity fraud. Desecration of human remains. The judge's voice was firm, unwavering. You not only took 5 lives, Mr. Holt, you attempted to erase them. To occupy what they built. To wear their lives like a stolen coat. You do not deserve freedom. Darren Holt was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Alexa Vaughn, though not found guilty of direct participation in the murders, was convicted of evidence tampering and obstruction based on her delayed cooperation and possession of items tied to the victims. She received a 12-year sentence, with eligibility for parole after 8. The Herzes, Sean and Isabel, who helped conceal digital records and launder stolen property, were given 6 and 4 years, respectively, in a plea deal for their cooperation. But some things weren't solved with a verdict. The Morales-Ellis family, once 5 voices in a home filled with warmth, never got a burial. The fire at Wolf Peak had reduced their remains to fragments, 2 damaged for caskets, 2 dispersed for closure. Instead, a memorial garden was built just outside Pineview. Ethan planted the first flower, a white lily. It grew, even through the first snowfall. On the plaque beside it, 5 names were etched. No dates. No descriptions. Stolen. Never forgotten. The town itself changed too. People stopped leaving their doors unlocked. Real estate brochures no longer featured Pineview Lodge. Clyde eventually retired from the diner, quietly handing it over to his niece. He never spoke much about the case again. But every Easter he would light a candle in the back booth where Ethan once sat, waiting for a family that would never return. As for Ethan, he moved back to California with his grandmother. He finished school, started college, studied architecture, perhaps inspired by the house he once thought would be his forever home. In a rare interview years later, when asked how he remembered that time, he didn't mention blood, or trials, or courtrooms. There's a kind of evil that doesn't come with a mask or a scream. Sometimes it walks beside you, smiles politely, and holds the door. That's the kind of evil we're never taught to see. And that's what this story became in the end. Not just a tragedy, but a caution. About envy disguised as friendliness. About obsession cloaked in charm. About the hidden spaces behind perfect walls. And how sometimes the greatest monsters aren't strangers in the night. They're the neighbor with a friendly wave.